They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but it doesn't always depict what is truly happening. Some photos seem innocent enough, but when we learn the true details behind them, they can sometimes be terrifying thanks to horrific events that occurred after they were taken. Number 10. We often hear of true crime cases in which someone's life is ended by a loved one who's trying to cash in on their life insurance policy. Usually, they stand to gain an enormous amount of money that's just too enticing to wait for. But this was not the case with a 19-year-old man named Alan Ruby. The case started on the 13th of October 2014, when Ruby, a college freshman, walked through the back door of his family's home and did the unthinkable. He was in financial trouble since he had a serious spending habit, and he believed he found a way to pay his debt, which totaled $3,000. Because of his lack of awareness of the value of money, his father John, who was the publisher of a weekly newspaper called Marlowe Review, decided to cut his allowance, and this left Alan enraged as he now had no way of paying the loan shark who was demanding his money back. Before entering the house, he walked over to his father's car where he stole a firearm. He then made his way inside and ended the lives of his mother, Tinker, and his sister, Catherine. He waited outside, and about an hour later, he also ended John's life. Before fleeing, he removed a disc containing security footage from the house and threw it into a lake along with his father's weapon. Following this, he returned to his dorm room at the University of Oklahoma to get his cell phone, which he'd purposefully left behind so that it couldn't be placed at the scene of the crime. Next, he took a trip to Dallas, where he watched a football game between his college and another in Texas. He and a few friends booked into the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he took a now infamous photo of his friends, and this was uploaded to his social media with the caption, "College wouldn't be half as great without these two peaches." Unbeknownst to his friends, he just ended the lives of his entire family, merely because he owed someone $3,000. Early on the 9th of October, he was pulled over by a police officer in Duncan, and it would later come to light that he provided a false name, Dakota Moore. It would also later come to light that Dakota Moore was someone known to Alan, and that they did not get along. The officer checked this name on his system, and it came back with a valid driver's license, so he was sent on his way with a citation for not having his license with him at the time. When Ruby arrived back at the crime scene, officers noted that he was nonchalant and didn't seem at all distressed when he was told that his family was no longer alive, and this immediately raised suspicions. The following day, while Alan was being questioned, he confessed that he was the culprit, and he revealed that his motive was to obtain his father's money, which was supposed to go to his mother's upon John's passing, but since Tinker was no longer alive, it would pass to him. He stood to inherit $20,000, but the insurance company left it up to the court to decide who the money should go to after his arrest. Following his trial, Alan was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, one for each of his victims. Number 9. When a serial killer is finally caught, we usually learn that the people close to them had no idea that they were living a double life. And the case involving Mikhail Popkov, a Russian ex-police officer, is no exception. In a photo that is hauntingly endearing, Popkov is sitting on the ground with his wife, Elena, who has her arms around his shoulders. In retrospect, the expression on Popkov's face seems pained, while Elena is clearly none the wiser. Not much is known about Popkov's life while he was growing up, but we know that he and Elena had a daughter named Ekaterina, and that he was employed as a police officer. Following this, he worked as a security guard for several different companies until his capture. And it would then come to light that he started committing his crimes while he was still working for the police, and would use this position to his advantage. On one occasion, he stopped his patrol car next to one of his victims and offered her a ride. She knew better than to get in just anyone's car, but she trusted Popkov since he was a police officer, and so she accepted his offer. But he then drove to a desolate wooded area where he intended to end her life, but he left, not knowing that she was still alive. She was badly hurt, but after she was found, she was taken to a hospital where she received the care that she needed, but she was unable to reveal who her attacker was, and Popkov would repeat this behavior for a further 14 years. He was so adept at hiding his second life that his friends and family described him as the perfect father and husband. His fellow police officers dubbed him Misha the Smile, since he was always in a good mood, and it said that he was an exemplary police officer. He would make sure to be seen out and about with his wife and daughter often to keep up the facade that he was a devoted family man, but in reality, he'd become one of the worst serial killers the world had ever seen. He would target women who he deemed immoral, but his definition of this was different from that of most people. If he spotted a woman attending a party without a man by her side, she immediately became a target. He would put on his police uniform in the dead of night and prowl the streets looking for his next victim. He was dubbed the werewolf by the media, but for many years his identity remained unknown, and the women in the region were terrified that they might be next to lose their lives. After 2 decades, the police finally found a clue. Tire tracks were left at several of the crime scenes, and they were matched to the vehicles used by police officers at that time. And more than 3,500 officers were asked to provide DNA samples. Popkov was one of these, and after his DNA matched the samples collected as evidence, he was arrested. At his trial, he was convicted of ending the lives of 78 women over the course of 20 years, but it's believed that that number might be as high as 200. Number 8. In May of 2016, Texas and Kansas were hit by torrential rains that wreaked havoc in both states, and several people ended up losing their lives as a result. The situation got so bad that residents of the city of Simonton, which is situated about 40 miles west of Houston, were ordered to evacuate because of fear that heavy floods would occur since water levels in the Brazos River had started rising to dangerous levels. In Houston, more than 700 households were tasked to evacuate when a creek in the Northwood Pines area started to flood. The Red Cross was involved in many areas, providing shelter to those who were forced to flee their homes. Most people managed to make it to safety, thanks to early warnings from the authorities, but not everyone was as lucky. One photo that was shared to the Facebook profile of 21-year-old Darren Charles Mitchell, who hailed from Navasota, still serves as a stark reminder of how quickly a flood can hit and the devastating effect it can have, not only on an area, but on people's lives. The photo shows the inside of Darren's truck, and it's clear that the rising floodwater has risen exponentially, trapping him inside. But before the photo was taken, he managed to call a few of his family members, including his brother, Roe Mitchell. He told Roe that his truck had become trapped in the water, but that he managed to make it out in time. But a witness would later tell the police what she saw, and it would seem that Darren was in a panicked state when he made the wrong decision. The woman stated that she watched as Darren made it out of the truck, but he was clearly undecided as to whether he should brave the rising water. He got back in and out several times and finally decided that it would be better to stay inside. It's believed that he then took the photo and posted it to his Facebook page with the caption, "All I wanted was to go home." He stayed in the vehicle for the next 10 minutes when the water finally swept it away, and it overturned with Darren still inside. The witness added that as soon as the truck flipped over, it disappeared beneath the water to the point that she couldn't even see the tires. It was eventually located in Kuykendall Creek, but Darren's remains were not found inside. He was later located just over a mile away, but he was no longer alive. During that same weekend, a further 6 people lost their lives when they were either surprised by rapidly rising floodwater, or they became trapped in their vehicles as Darren had. Number 7. This image was uploaded to social media by April Holt. It was taken during a celebration of her 29th birthday on the 7th of June 2023, and it was the last photo ever taken of her. At the time, she was married to 33-year-old Donovan Holt, and they had 2 children together. But it became apparent to her family and friends that she was no longer happy with the relationship. About a week after the photo was taken, she requested that they get a divorce, but it wasn't the first time that she considered that route. According to her mother, Jamie Dickerson, she'd attempted to leave Donovan several times before, but always changed her mind. But she'd made up her mind to end the relationship for good this time, for her own sake and that of her 2 children. She was the owner of a lash studio in Nashville, Tennessee, and her family states that she was very devoted to her children. She also stated that she was excited about her future, but she needed to leave Donovan to move forward. But she never got the chance to move on since Donovan took the request badly, and what he did next left April's family devastated. April was found unconscious in the bathroom of the couple's home, which is situated in the Cane Ridge Parkway neighborhood of Nashville. She was found with a plastic bag taped around her neck, but she was still alive, and she was rushed to Southern Hills Hospital. There, the doctors did everything they could to save her life, but they were unsuccessful. Jamie managed to see April before she passed away, and she decided to get to the bottom of the case no matter what. She contacted the district attorney's office and the police relentlessly to gather as much information as possible, but she felt that she was being ignored. She then contacted the Community Review Board of Nashville, and finally she made some progress. She received a 47-page report about the case, and while reading through it, found a clue that would break the case wide open. It isn't known why the police failed to notice this one detail, but Jamie did, and she followed through. The report stated that Donovan's fingerprints were found on the tape and the plastic bag that were found around April's neck, and she made the police aware of this, but they told her that this didn't prove his guilt and that they would not be arresting him. But she refused to let it go, and she came up with a plan. She took a photo of that specific section of the report and sent it to Donovan. He was given two choices: either confess to what he had done, or she would contact the cold case department, which would conduct a full investigation. Shortly after, her phone rang, and Donovan confessed that he had strangled April in their home. Number 6. Selfies have been a trend for many years now, and the popularity of these types of photos shows no signs of slowing down. They're an easy way to take a quick photo of oneself without the need to ask anyone to handle your camera, and hence it eliminates the risk of it being stolen. But it's no secret that many people have been badly injured or worse while trying to snap one of these memories, and one of the most famous cases was when 3 women, Essa Ricker, Kelsey Webster, and Savannah Webster, decided to take a selfie with all 3 of them in frame, but they made a fatal error in the process. While a train was passing by Covered Bridge Canyon in Utah, they posed for a selfie and waved at the engineer as he drove by. But unbeknownst to them, another train was coming from the opposite direction, and they were struck. Essa and Kelsey lost their lives instantly, and Savannah lost her life while being treated in a hospital when the decision was made to remove her from life support. It's just one of many tragic cases involving selfies and tragedy, as was the case of 30-year-old Andrea Mazzetto, who in 2022 was spending time with his girlfriend, Sarah, in an Italian canyon. He was known to be a self-employed fitness enthusiast who was living in the province of Rovigo, Italy, and according to his family, he enjoyed spending time outdoors and had a particular love of climbing. At around 2 p.m. on the 20th of August that year, the couple was hiding in Rozzo, northern Italy. They'd been walking along the Alternato Trail and intended to go for a short walk when they came upon a ravine and decided to take a selfie together to show the beautiful view behind them. The photo was taken by Andrea, as can be seen in a photo that was uploaded to Sarah's Instagram account, but it was deleted shortly after, since the tragedy struck just moments after the photo was taken and uploaded. Moments later, Andrea's photo slipped out of his hand and fell down the ravine. He decided to try and retrieve it, but while doing so, he lost his balance and fell about 330 feet, leaving Sarah in a state of shock. She would later reveal that she had reservations about going on the hike, since she usually got dizzy while climbing in elevated areas, but he convinced her to go along with him, and at first she believed it to be a good decision, since they were having a good time taking in the fresh air and stunning views. She explained that as they reached the end of one path, they came across a large rock and decided to climb to the top. After taking a few photos of the area, Andrea asked her to pose with them for the selfie, and she agreed. But while standing on the edge of the rock, she started to feel dizzy and nauseous. She felt as though she was about to lose her balance, and Andrea grabbed her hand to help her steady herself. But in the process, he dropped his phone and it came to rest in some bushes further down the ravine. He decided to climb down to see if he could find it, but he then yelled back that his foot had gotten stuck. He managed to wrench his foot out of the crevice, but as soon as he did so, the rock crumbled beneath him, and he fell a few feet, but his momentum caused him to roll over the edge of the ravine, and the last thing she heard was a scream as he plummeted over 300 feet to the bottom. Number 5. Wedding photographers have the thankless task of documenting the happy couple's special day and making sure that they capture all of the guests and attendants so that those memories can be relived later on. While it may seem like an easy job, it can often result in a very long day, and when all is said and done, the couple isn't always happy with the results. Furthermore, they often have to deal with unruly guests who've ingested too much alcohol, making it difficult to capture these moments without ruining anyone's reputation. But in most cases, the day goes well, and they're paid well for their efforts. One can only wonder, though, whether the photographer who took this photo would have accepted the job if he knew the true nature of the man it depicts, who also happens to be the groom. The man is well dressed, as is to be expected, since it was his wedding day, and he's seen looking at the camera with a content look on his face, as he likely had just gotten married to the love of his life. But he's hiding a secret that no one at that wedding was aware of. The man shown here is Peter Sutcliffe, who was also known as the Yorkshire Ripper, though he'd not been linked to that name at the time the photo was taken. On that day, the 10th of August 1974, Sutcliffe got married to Sonia Surma Woodward, who must have been elated to tie the knot, but she had no idea that her new husband had ended the lives of several women by this point, and the police were looking to identify him. His crime spree started in 1969 while he was out in the streets of Bradford in the UK, looking for a woman who'd swindled him out of an unknown amount of money. But while he was searching for her, he encountered a street worker, whom he then followed and struck over the head with a rock that he'd wrapped in a sock. He was tracked down by the police, but the woman decided not to press charges, and nothing further was done. His second attack would only occur 6 years later in 1975, a year after his marriage to Sonia. On that occasion, he was out on the streets again when he happened across a 36-year-old woman named Anna Rogulski, who he then assaulted with a hammer and a sharpened blade. Luckily, someone nearby heard the commotion and Sutcliffe fled. Anna survived but had to undergo brain surgery, and she was left traumatized for the rest of her life. She struggled to go out into public, as she believed at times that people were staring and pointing at her, and that she would later state that she wished he'd ended her life after all. But this was just the beginning of Sutcliffe's disturbing career as a serial killer. He would claim the life of 28-year-old Wilma McCann in Leeds later that same year. And over the course of the next 5 years, he would end the lives of at least 13 women and attack a further 7 without ending their lives. Women living in the areas where the attacks took place were fearful of leaving their homes, and it was only in January of 1981 when Sutcliffe was stopped by the police while in the company of a street worker that he was finally arrested. Number 4. Spitting Caves is a popular tourist spot in Portlock, Honolulu, Hawaii, where many people have jumped from a distance of about 60 feet into the ocean below. It offers amazing views of the ocean and surrounding areas, but it's also known to be extremely dangerous. Several people have lost their lives while attempting these jumps at the caves, many of whom were serving in the Navy at the time. The victims include 27-year-old Daniel Lowe, 45-year-old Glenn Cook, 21-year-old Navy Operations Specialist 3rd Class Zachary Ryan Johnson, 29-year-old Stephen LeBlanc, and 20-year-old Darren Katauka. The caves got their names from the way the seawater reacts when the waves are particularly large. When they roll into the cave, they hit the cave's back wall, causing the water to be spat back out through the cave opening. But the area is also known for its fast-moving currents that can be unpredictable at the best of times. While most people who jump off the cliff suffer no injuries, the public has been repeatedly warned not to take part in this activity, since the ocean below is extremely unpredictable, and tragedy can strike at any moment. But 22-year-old Shannon Nunez was not dissuaded by these warnings. In June of 2013, she was a member of the US Navy and part of the patrol squadron that was stationed at the Marine Corps Base Hawaii in Kaneohe Bay. On the 8th of June that year, she was enjoying some free time with a few friends, and they decided to go swimming near the caves. At around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon, she decided to climb to the top of the caves to carry out a cliff dive. But before doing so, she took a photo of her feet on the very edge of the cliff, and the ocean can be seen far below. Moments later, she leaped off the cliff into the churning water, and what should have been a fun activity quickly turned into tragedy. As soon as she entered the water, she was taken by a strong current, and it was immediately clear that she was in trouble. She fought against the current, but stood no chance of making it back to land, as she was swept further and further away from her friends and safety. The police were called, and firefighters risked their lives to locate her, and Shannon was finally brought back to shore. They then performed CPR in an effort to revive her, but she never responded and was declared deceased at the scene. The Navy would later release a statement in which they expressed their disbelief at the tragedy and reminded the public to always remain aware of the conditions in the ocean before entering. Number 3. There's a very good reason why scuba divers need to complete comprehensive training before they're allowed to brave the water alone. They need to be fully aware of how their equipment works, when the water is safe to enter, and what to do in the event that they find themselves in trouble while underwater. It's an activity that includes a lot of risk, such as rushing currents, underwater debris, dangerous wildlife, and equipment failures that can quickly lead to someone losing their life, as was the case with 20-year-old Dion Dreyer, a South African scuba diver. In 1994, Dion was diving in an area known as Bushman's Hole, a submerged freshwater cave in the Northern Cape. He was asked to assist another diver, Nuno Gomez, who wanted to dive to a depth of 490 feet. But at some point, after diving about 165, he lost consciousness, likely due to a lack of oxygen, suggesting that he'd suffered an equipment malfunction. He was unable to make it out of the cave and unfortunately passed away. His body sank to a depth of 230 feet, where it remained since rescuers were unable to locate him. Then in 2004, an Australian diver named Dave Shaw set his sights on becoming only the second diver to reach the bottom of the caves. Gomez had achieved this feat 2 years after Dion lost his life, but Shaw decided that he didn't merely want to reach the bottom, as he also wanted to explore that bottom of the cave. He managed to reach the bottom, and while there, he found Dion's remains. He decided that he would inform the authorities and then attempt to retrieve the remains. In January the next year, he returned to the cave after promising Dion's father that he would bring his son back to the surface, and he was joined by 7 others. With him were his usual diving partner, Don Shirley, Mark Andrews, Dusan Stojakovic, Peter Erbst, Lo Vingerling, Truan Lass, and Steven Stander. Verna van Schalik would remain on the surface to monitor the recovery operation from above, and on the day, everyone was certain that they would be successful. Dave would enter the water first, followed 13 minutes later by Don, and then the rest of the divers would enter following the same pattern. The plan was for Dave to reach the bottom of the cave during the first 13 minutes, after which he would locate Dion and place his body in a bag. Once this was done, the bag would be passed to Don and so on until Dion was brought to the surface. A photo taken just moments before Dave entered the water shows him sitting in front of the caves in his scuba gear, and he seems eager to get going while smiling at the camera. The first part of the operation could not have gone more smoothly, as Dave reached the bottom as planned, and he located Dion as he had before. But he attempted to replace the remains into the bag, and he encountered an unexpected issue as the body started to float. In the process, lines from the bag became entangled with his flashlight, and that was slung over his shoulder, and he realized he was in trouble. In the resulting struggle to free himself, he started to panic, and his breathing became more rapid. This used up a lot of his air, and in the end, he was unable to untangle himself. The second diver realized that something was wrong, but had never dived to that depth before, and he was forced to return to the surface. Dave lost his life next to Dion's body, and both men were recovered 3 days later. The incident had been made into a 2020 documentary called Dave's Not Coming Back, a reference to the phrase written on a slate by one of the other divers upon realizing that Dave had lost his life in that cave. Number 2. This photo shows one of the happiest moments in the life of Kevin Jeong, a 26-year-old MIT graduate student at Yale University and an Army veteran, as he proposed to his girlfriend, Zion Perry, at a waterfall in the Connecticut wilderness. He was known to his friends and family as a good religious man who volunteered his own time to help homeless people in New Haven, his hometown. He's said to have been liked by everyone he met, but his life would be ended just a week later in a perplexing case involving a man called Juan Pan. In December of 2020, the police in New Haven were dealing with a strange string of incidents. Someone had traveled to 2 different neighborhoods in New Haven and then opened fire at random houses for reasons unknown. There were 3 of these incidents, each taking place a month apart in December of 2020, and then in January and February of 2021. Quite unbelievably, no one was injured in these attacks, but witnesses described seeing a dark-colored SUV in the area before the shots were fired, and the same caliber shell casings were recovered at each site. While the police were at a loss as to who the culprit was, they were certain that the same person was responsible for all 3 incidents, and they feared that this was only the beginning of something even more sinister. By January of 2021, Kevin and Zion had been together for about a year, and it was then that he proposed to her. They were both devout Christians who met at church, and they were both science students at Yale University. Their future together seemed bright since they were both dedicated, hard workers, and they were excited to start a new chapter in their lives together. But then, tragedy struck. On the 6th of February that year, the police were called out to a crime scene, and when they arrived, they found Kevin deceased. He was lying in the street about 100 feet from his vehicle, and it was determined that he'd been attacked with the same caliber firearm that was used in the previous incidents. Surveillance cameras in the area revealed what happened that night. At around 8:30 p.m. that night, a vehicle crashed into the back of Kevin's Prius, though only the audio was captured. A dark-colored SUV was then seen rolling into the camera's view, but it then stopped and reversed back out of sight. Kevin was seen getting out of his vehicle and approaching the SUV, but 8 shots were then fired, and Kevin's screams could be heard. A woman would report that she saw the culprit standing over Kevin after ending his life, and that he fired at him again. Investigators felt that this was no mere case of road rage, and that there was something personal about the attack. The next day, employees from an Arby's contacted the police officer after finding a bag with license plates, a firearm, and ammunition inside, and an officer recalled seeing the bag in the car of Juan Pan the previous night. It came to light that he was driving a stolen SUV, and he was eventually tracked to Montgomery, Alabama, where he was arrested. He pleaded guilty to ending Kevin's life and received a sentence of 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 1. In 1980, 30-year-old David Johnston was one of the leading scientists for the United States Geological Survey monitoring team, and he was stationed at the volatile Mount St. Helens, which was expected to erupt at any moment. The mountain had lain dormant for over a century, and when it started showing signs of activity, David was the very first volcanologist to reach the area. He was in the midst of a study of volcanic gas emissions, having gained his PhD just 2 years earlier, and he was interested in discovering what happens to different gases when a volcano erupts. According to his family, he was elated to be at the mountain, and on several occasions during phone calls home, stated he couldn't believe how lucky he was to be paid for conducting his research at the famous site. He had always hoped to land a position with the Geological Survey, and at last his dream had come true. On the evening of the 17th of May, 1980, he arrived at the Coldwater 2 observation station, which was believed to be just outside the volcano's reach, should it erupt, and he took over for Harry Glicken, his assistant in the field. Upon his arrival, David told Harry and 2 other volcanologists to retire for the night, as he planned to keep an eye on the mountain during the night. It was a tense but exciting time, as they all awaited for the moment when the mountain would finally erupt. One man who was present at the time would later state that he believed David loved his job so much because he was likened to putting together the pieces of an unknown puzzle that he was captivated by. It was expected that when the mountain erupted, it would release high levels of gas, much higher than normal since it had laid dormant for so long, and David was more than excited to measure their levels for this study. At one point, he traveled into a crater at the summit, where he collected water samples, and while many people thought this was a foolish act, it was in David's nature to sate his curiosity. But the day before the eruption, he'd expressed his frustration at the fact that he hadn't seen any high levels of gas emissions, and it would later come to light that this was due to the inside of the mountain being waterlogged. In the last photo taken of David, he's seen sitting in a chair by the side of the mountain, and the look of joy on his face is undeniable. It was taken by Glicken as he left the observation post that night, and 13 hours later, the much-anticipated event finally arrived. Unfortunately, thanks to a landslide that occurred on the north side of the mountain, the entire eruption happened laterally rather than vertically, and David was caught in the blast. The entire observation post was destroyed, and his remains were never found. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.